start recording the meeting. And my name is Laura Myers. I am the co-chair of UNNC's Planning and Zoning Committee. John, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is John Arnold. I am area representative for Jefferson Park, Area 6 at UNNC, and I'm the co-chair of this committee.
And I am going to share the screen with our agenda. And can you see the agenda?
Not yet, but it's coming.
Okay. While it's coming up, the first item is a welcome, call to order, introductions, kind of did that, and approval of the agenda. But part of the introduction is always a little bit of an explanation. United Neighborhoods Neighborhood Council has as its standard operating practice, we appoint our chairs and co-chairs of committees, but otherwise our committees are a place where our stakeholders are invited to fully participate. And that means they're a member of the committee for the evening. We make recommendations to the governing board. We do not make final decisions. If you are a stakeholder for UNNC, and if you're at this meeting, you are, you may make motions, you may vote, fully participate. That also means you should be following the mandatory code of conduct that all neighborhood councils throughout the city, board members must follow. So being considerate and respectful, don't speak over other people. Since this is on Zoom, please raise your hand, little blue hand on the Zoom, not just your hand, although a few of us who are co-hosts have to raise our actual hands, and basically just be respectful. Zoom keeps changing its security modes. So we do not use chat to chat with each other. Please do not utilize the chat. Right now you could technically, but you should not be using the chat to comment to other people, comment on the items, nothing of that sort. The only reason to use the chat would be if we ask you to put your email or phone number in, that's fine. If you're having trouble raising your hand, you can say, I would like to speak on this. I can't raise my hand. And then John and I will post motions. What's changed is suddenly Zoom has eliminated the chat to host only function. So we're trying to figure out how to get it back. Okay, so on this item is approval of the agenda. I'm placing the agenda in front of you. You can see my screen now, right?
We can, Laura, but we can only see a portion of the agenda.
Yeah, I know. So we're going to scroll through. So the next thing would be public comments. Then item 3 is case number DIR 2021-3086. You can see all the rest of it. A project on St. Andrew's Place in Angeles Vista. Item 4 is a project update and presentation, and we're actually going to need to take a vote tonight on the Crenshaw Crossing project. A very brief discussion about our new UNNC Mobility and Transportation Subcommittee. And under item 6, follow up to previous cases, and I think maybe most of you got an email today from UNNC about this. City Planning Department staff, after sitting on something for 5 months, has asked that UNNC and the community make their comments about 1537 Wilton Place's new design by the end of this month. So we're suddenly going to add that to this agenda under previous cases. So I'm going to write that in. 1537 South Wilton Place design discussion and action. And I'm going to highlight that in red. So what I need is a motion to approve the agenda as altered and a second.
I'll move to approve the agenda as adjusted, altered.
Right. And is there a second? Thank you. And who was that, please?
Rosie Brown.
Hi, Rosie. Thank you. So it's been moved by John. I'm going to stop the share. Seconded by Rosie. And this is not like a BAC. So all in favor, either say aye or raise your physical hand or raise your blue hand in the participants window, please. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 11. So it's accepted. It's more than half of 20. Okay, so the next item is public comments on any item not on tonight's agenda. Sarah, your hand is up. Do you have a public comment? Oop, and her hand went down. Michael Kimbrough. But you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get my hand down.
Your hand is up. Your hand is good up.
I don't want it to be.
Oh.
Cut off my arm.
I'm lowering your hand for you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any actual public comments? Then let us move on to the first, which is item 3, but the first item. Case number DIR. DIR stands for Directors. 2021-3086. TOC, which is Transit Oriented Community. And I'm going to let our applicants tell me what HCA is. And then PSH is Permanent Supportive Housing at 1808 South St. Andrews Place in Angeles Vista. And this basically is a 20-unit affordable and supportive housing development. And I think what we would all like is to hear from our group of applicants. So Dylan, are you leading that charge? So I'd like to introduce Dylan Coyle.
Hello. Yes, I'm Dylan Coyle. I'm here with Clifford Beers Housing, as is my colleague, Christian Almada. And we are gonna tell you a little about this project tonight. Are we ready? Laura, are we ready to begin?
You're absolutely ready to begin. And you are a co-host, so you can share your screen.
All right, then. I will do that now. And let's get started. So the steps on St. Andrews, it's at 1808 South St. Andrews Place. And we are Clifford Beers Housing. Our architects who are also here this evening are Lorcan O'Hurley Architects, and they're going to tell you about the design when we get a little further on into the presentation. But first, a little bit about who we are as Clifford Beers as an organization. So Clifford Beers Housing believes that communities are healthy when people of all backgrounds, incomes, and needs live together in beautifully designed buildings that encourage interaction. Some of those people may be unhoused, some of them may not be, some of them may have mental health needs, some of them may have less intensive mental health needs, but we believe that a true strong community is when all of those populations can be safe, can live together. And we also have on-site supportive services at our developments, and that will also be the case here. To provide additional support for anyone who needs it. So we've been around for a little while now. A little more on the prior slide. I clicked a little before I meant to, sorry. So just as an example of the sort of work that we do, this project has a rehab component. This is not our first time doing that. Another project where we've done that before that we were happy with the result was one in Long Beach called Emmanuel Senior Housing. 26 units, similar in size to this one at 20 units. It was an unused church building that we acquired and converted most of its spaces to apartments. However, the sanctuary, we were able to retain a lot of that. Here you can see how it turned into a community room. The organ's still there, the organ still works. And the facade, as you can see, still looks pretty much like it did, but now it is housing instead of a religious facility, which at that point it was already defunct anyways. So that's just one sample of what we do. We have 13 projects at this point that are either under construction or completed, and 3 more in what's called pre-development that have not broken ground yet, including this one. So the location of this project, 1808 South St. Andrews Place, is at the corner of almost at the corner of 18th Street and St. Andrews Place, between Washington Boulevard and Venice Boulevard, right near Western Avenue. So there's a lot of good bus service in there. Venice, Washington, and Western all have a lot of high frequency bus service on them. And that really helps our population who tends to drive less. So today, this is what the property looks like. If you drive by it, you'll see a chain link fence in the front of it. This building has been vacant since about 2008. And this is the condition that it's currently in. The structure is still salvageable, and the look, we still like the way that it looks from the street, and believe that this building still has something to contribute, even if it's not in brand new condition. So a description of what this is and what it's going to be. So it's going to be 20 units, 8 units, which will be in the shell of the house, which is going to be gut renovated, and 12 units of new construction in the back behind the house, not particularly visible from the street. The street, St. Andrews, is out here. The house, it's only 1 story higher than the house, and it's the same, like there's a 3-story building immediately behind it, so it's not breaking, it's not unusually tall for its area. And there's this community room in the middle here with a roof deck on top. The roof deck will also be how you access these units in the top of the house, which we'll explain a little more later. So in keeping with who we are as a company, it's going to be a mixture of permanent, supportive, and affordable units. And the people concerned, whose offices are right nearby, will provide supportive services, though there will also be an office on site for the supportive services provider. The city owns this property. We acquired it, or are still in the process of acquiring it, through an RFP back in 2019, which we won. That will eventually lead to a ground lease with the city, with a base term of 55 years that could extend up to 99 years. And the southern facing rooftops will have solar panels, and there won't be parking, which is in keeping with the small size of the project and the needs of our population. So this is a unit layout. This is, if you were looking at the project from the south, this is kind of the general layout of things. And from here, I'd like to introduce our architectural partners, Brian Adolph and Kayla Manning of Lorca O'Hurley Architects, who will take you through the architecture in a little bit more detail. And
Do I need to add another host?
No, I don't think so. No.
So Dylan, you'll keep moving it forward. Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Dylan. And thanks everybody else for joining the call. Not sure if you're here for us, but appreciate the turnout. So as Dylan was saying, this is a cross-section through the proposed design, a very simple one, but it shows kind of the fundamental approach that we've taken with input from the community, especially Laura and John, who are on this call, is to protect the existing Craftsman house while modernizing the interior to meet the needs of today's housing and give this notable home a new life. And in addition, we're of course proposing a new 3-story structure in the rear yard and that central common space that's uniting the two. So altogether, as Dylan said, we're going to be adding 20 dwellings of permanent supportive housing. So we're considering kind of a marriage of what's there today with what's needed today in LA. And Dylan, you want to take the next one? So here's the ground floor plan. The building's divided again clearly between the old and the new. That's separated by that common area in the middle, which also provides the main entry. Although I should say the front 2 units are entered separately from the front porch. In order to provide kind of code compliant dwellings, however, inside the existing house, we've had to adapt a new layout for the interior walls on both floors. there's a great many requirements for supportive housing, and it's just not feasible for us to convert, living rooms and dining rooms and kind of provide modern dwelling units. But we do intend to protect a few key craftsman details on the ground floor, including a cabinetry and a fireplace, which will be featured in that manager's office. A few things to note on the outside. With the existing house preserved, LA zoning requirements effectively prevent us to the ability to provide parking on site, as Dylan had mentioned. But fortunately, it's not a requirement for a project of this nature. And there may be some new required features concealed in the front, in particular necessities for universal access, including a ramp up to the front porch. We plan on having the new construction at grade for simpler and more universal access, along with lowering 2 ground floor units, units 3 and 4, in the existing house, which will be accessed off the community room there in the middle. Go upstairs. Hey, would go up to the second floor, Dylan, please. Great, thanks. Up to the second floor, which is fairly similar to the floor below, aside from that central roof deck between the house at the front and the building to the rear, which will be new. You can see there's an elevator which will provide access to all floors and then across the common roof deck to enter to the existing house rather than a stair up from inside the existing house, which there isn't room for. And then the 2 stairs of the common roof deck provide access both to the roof deck from the ground and another means up to the units above on the second floor. And that common roof deck also helps us satisfy a Los Angeles zoning requirement for open space. And we go up to the last floor here. And that 3rd floor is only for the new building at the rear, which helps keeps the bulk of the site, the bulk of the building, and especially the new building, to the back of the site and towards the larger developments on Manhattan Place. We're also trying to prioritize sustainability through this project, including maximizing the amount of solar panels that we can provide, which you can see here on the south side of the front house. We'll also feature them on the new construction at the back. And the next rendering here is actually going to be a series of renderings. It's a conceptual rendering of the design from the corner of St. Andrews and 18th. The priority again is for the Craftsman House to be maintained, especially the exterior facades that are visible from the street and of course the roof. This may include the need to repair and replace in kind with compatible materials, especially for areas that are rotted. I think Dylan mentioned it has been occupied in quite a while and does need repair. The design of the new building will be referencing the 2 gabled roofs at the front house, but our approach is that it's new, we're making it look new too. And you can see it from another angle here in the next view, which is more elevational, but this one gives a good sense of the 3 clear parts of the design: the Craftsman House at the front, which will be what is most visible from the street, a very open common area in the middle, and a modern building at the rear, which is trying to reference and kind of reinterpret that building up front. You can also see the raised front porch is maintained at the front, while a path at grade leads to the common room entrance at the middle of the site. And this view also showcases, or actually they're not showcasing right now, but actually you can see them on the rear building here. That's that solar panel array on those roofs at the top. And then the last view that we have for you today is just an axonometric bird's eye. And again, it shows that basic configuration of the proposed design. And Dylan, I'll give it back to you.
And that's all we got. So if anyone has any questions, we're ready to take them.
Okay, so Michael has a question, and we can either take this down or go back up to a pretty shot, but the word thank you doesn't help us here.
Yeah.
So that'd be fine. Michael, Kimbrough.
Thank you. So very nice project, gentlemen. My first question, and you may have covered it, but I may not have been able to hear, how were you able to overcome the parking requirement?
Okay, Brian, I guess I can take this one.
Yeah.
So this project, it's 100% affordable, transit-oriented communities project. And because of that, no parking is required.
Okay.
Dylan, can I just ask a follow-up? The one glitch that suddenly I'm hearing from housing providers is that the homeless people right now who are being placed into some projects around town have been living in their cars, and they don't want to give up their cars, but they may be just turning down housing opportunities. So there's nothing we can do about that in this project, but have you experienced that on other projects as well? I mean, I'm hearing this from other housing providers.
Christian, what do you think?
Laura, I've heard this from other service providers as well, but no, we don't experience them on our buildings. The way it works is folks are pulled from something called a coordinated entry system. And that's like a gigantic pool of folks that essentially are in dire need of housing. And these individuals, most of them don't have vehicles. I have heard the condition that you're talking about, particularly in the tiny home space, which is sort of a very separate breed of housing than ours, because that's more interim, but we provide permanent supportive housing. So no, we don't have that situation.
Okay. Rosie.
Yeah, my question, one of them was about the housing, the parking also. So not even one handicap space either.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello, can you hear me?
we can.
Yeah.
They're deciding who's going to answer that for you.
Yeah, I can start, Dylan, if you want. So
Okay.
on the parking front, I mean, there's a few issues. You know, in all these projects, this is a particular project where there's a lot of overlapping requirements from zoning overlays, from affordable housing, and with keeping the existing house, it makes it very difficult to provide any parking on the site, because we can't put any parking in the front yard based on the overlay district that this is in, and we actually have we need a passageway to get to the rear yard, and so we can't have that overlap with parking, and so there really just isn't an opportunity to actually even provide parking on the site. And it just so happens that we also have this avenue for providing this much housing, which is a great benefit, I think, to the city, and not providing any parking along with it.
You said it's 20 units, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in this picture here, this building on the right, the all white looking building, right next door to what is that again?
So
Not
that's
that gray one, the one that's right next door to the Craftsman type house.
This one right here.
Rosie, do you
No.
mean the north? I
This-
might be able to answer this.
It's
The
the
one
white.
to the left, which is north, is a bungalow court apartment facing 18th Street, and it has garages and parking. The one to
Okay.
the south, which is on the right, if I'm not mistaken, the front piece is a single family house, right? With some units built in the back.
Yes.
So the new structure that you're building will look nothing like a Craftsman or older home, just all modern. So we're gonna have old home and modern home mixed together right there, right? Correct?
That's correct.
Mm. And what color is this modern supposed to be?
White or a light gray. And a lot of times when approaching these, and this is also just with my experience in working with the city, is that when we put the old and the new together, we actually try to keep them separate and not pretend like the new structure is imitation of the old.
Right. So let me ask you, Brian, though. Obviously on the old structure, you're going to use historic colors on the Craftsman house. Not necessarily the color it is now, but some proper Craftsman colors when you finally paint it. Earth tones, presumably, green, brown, whatever. Any feasibility to have the rear structure not matchy-match, but blend to that theme?
Yeah, I think that's not. Yeah, as far as color, we are
Yeah.
thinking it might be a wood structure in terms of the facade material that might echo the kind of shingle effect of that Craftsman house. Again, not in an imitative way, but
Right.
be something similar. I think the colors. If it's a color issue, I think that's something that we could look at as having them be a little more complementary. If that's what you're thinking of.
Okay.
And I would say that the finishes have not been defined yet.
Yeah.
So the finishes there's plenty of time to have that discussion.
Okay, Blake.
Hi, yeah, just following on with that, there's been a lot of conversations about ADUs, in a historic area. And that although the ADUs don't fall under, like HPOZ design review, that through the city planning process, there can be guidance, to try and have them be compatible. And although I understand the concept of, it's not like you're going to create some ersatz, building with, all those units in it, that's going to be like a quote unquote craftsman building. I think as you do proceed through it, having the materials, maybe be more, relative to the period of significance. It'll clearly be a modern building. It'll clearly be distinguished. But I think having there be those compatible elements in some way is like just tipping your hat to, where the building is. Because I think we've all seen, the places where in mid block, a house gets taken away, and obviously that's not what's happening here. And then just this modern structure drops down and kind of interrupts everything. So I think whatever you guys can do as you move through that process to kind of just keep that in mind. Again, it will be modern, it will be different and distinct, but I think that will that'll help the process. And it's certainly what has been talked about, trying to encourage through the city planning process of like ADUs that don't have like, something that looks like it should be in Tucson, on a historic block. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Rosie, you have your hand up again?
Yes. Yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
don't want it to look like modern prison, modern update, not a modern prison, which is a lot of times they come in and show us something that looks like a prison. What about the landscape? Are you going to use drought tolerant California natives?
So the landscape is in an earlier stage. I mean, having something that is drought tolerant and fire resistant is going to be a consideration. We're also interested in the idea of having edible plants of some sort, whether that be citrus trees or some other sort of fruit trees, and getting those in where we can. But yeah, the landscaping is still beyond that. Like, it's still kind of rough these days at this point.
Yeah, Rosie, to add to that, there's also an opportunity here to seek guidance from you all as to, what you would like to see there, giving the premature stages of the landscape plan at this point in time. So if the group has any recommendations, we're happy to take them and happy to incorporate those into the plans.
Okay. So you do have a relatively deep front yard that will be rather lushly landscaped based on the prior discussions that we had. And I will add one of the conversations, UNNC has many committees. So one of them is the environmental committee. So one of the things it's been discussing lately are, I can't remember the name of the plant, someone will jump in, but what I would call butterfly bushes, the plants for monarch butterflies, for the caterpillars. So, I mean, we like the idea of native plants. We like the idea of edibles. The city likes the idea of drought resistant, but that could be anything. So, and, I have to say, from my perspective, personal perspective, this is one of the houses that dates from the beginning of Angeles Vista. The community worked for many years, 20 some years, to have a protective overlay. And the Community Redevelopment Agency had purchased this house also many years ago and used some federal funding that essentially declared it historic on its own, whatever that may mean. So I'm personally just thrilled that this has never been a battle over whether or not they're going to save the house. This house is going to stay, so the character of the neighborhood will be retained and there will be infill behind it. But the blocky buildings you see behind the new building are in fact blocky modern apartment buildings. So, from the streetscape on the St. Andrews side right now, you do see a blocky, tall apartment building. So the fact that this one actually has some slanting to its roof, I mean, it's actually going to soften it, not increase that infill look. So, so on a personal basis, I'm thrilled. I'm not a voter here. I'm the chair. So anyway, are there other questions, comments? Okay, so what we've been asked to do, I mean, this is an entitlement project to some degree at the city, which you guys should explain. And we also have been asked potentially to ask our board to be able to, in the future, but try and do this in one action, write a letter or letters, as the case may be, supporting the project, so that if most of you may know that when we see these projects of affordable housing, they end up needing to have funding from multiple sources. And some of those funders want to see letters of support from the community. So we have in effect, two things before us tonight, the entitlements, and then should we recommend to the board that it also, in the future, but one action, support the project via letter. Can you remind me what the land use entitlements are?
So we're entitling this through transit-oriented communities. There are some additional incentives. For anyone who isn't familiar on the call, TOC has base incentives and additional incentives. And the additional incentives are require a little bit more approval than the base incentives. And the additional incentives we're seeking are having a little bit less open space, though, as you can see, there still is a lot of open space provided, and a little bit on setbacks. So those are the two things that we are asking for. We're not asking for height, and we're not asking for any density beyond the transit-oriented communities' base incentives.
So is it correct that the front yard doesn't count in the open space calculation?
Yep, that's the way we understand
For
it.
an incentive for open space, but providing a ton of open space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what would the motion need to be? Would it need to be support? Well, let me just ask you, I'm going to say recommend to the governing board to support the project as presented with a desire to utilize colors sympathetic to the craftsman movement and further consultation on landscaping, or a landscape plan that, yeah, with that. Anyway, anybody want to make that motion? Can I say that neither John nor I should make the motion? I can certainly type a motion if you want me to do that. Hi, Blake. But you're muted.
Can we make that motion as you stated it, and maybe include in addition to the colors, just with the materials suggestion?
Okay, so let me do it. I'm going to start typing, but you're not going to see what I'm typing right away. Okay, so now this is the beginning of it. What did you want to say, Blake, about paint colors and materials?
Yeah, you mentioned with sympathetic paint colors, and I would just add materials related to the period.
And landscaping that includes edibles and native. Okay, so can everybody see what would be the motion if somebody had yet made that, which no one has? Recommend to the UNNC governing board that it support the project as presented, support the request for reduced open space and side yards, with sympathetic paint colors and materials that relate to the period, and landscaping that includes edibles and native plants. Yes?
I would support making that motion.
Moved by Blake McCormick. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so this would be the first of maybe two motions, but this is the motion on the table. So is there any further discussion about this?
I just want to say I was totally remiss at the beginning of this to not recuse myself. I just remember when Clifford Brewers was going through their projects that they're our client, so I cannot participate. So that's why I've checked out.
Right, so that's why you're not voting, you didn't make a motion.
And I've been abnormally quiet.
Abnormally quiet, yes.
And so,
Okay.
Laura, I also think it may be fair to note to ask the question. This is a rendering. It's not a final design exterior representation of the facade, is it? Because that looks like corrugated metal.
Yeah, no, that's correct. It's not the final.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so that's the motion. I'm not sure who's here on the Zoom call who feels they're a stakeholder who can vote, but I want to remind people who are perhaps new to Zoom or less used to Zoom. You can raise your hand using a little raised hand function, but to get to that, you would need to click on the word participants, and it brings up a box, and you will see all the people who are here, but at the bottom of that box, you'll also see a function called raised hand. So what I'd like to see is raised hands if you're voting yes, or reaction. You can click on the reaction box and raise a hand that way. So how many people who supports this motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Neither John nor I are voting. And I think people who are here who are presenters for other matters are not voting. So I believe motion passes. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I believe the motion passes. Thank you. Is there any, well, let me just ask you this. Anybody voting no? Everybody take their hand down. Anybody voting no? Cheryl, no. Okay, nobody's voting no, so motion passes. John, I know you're not voting and you're recusing, but can I just ask you a co-chair question? Do we need to have a second motion regarding writing letters of support? Or should I take that straight to the board?
I think you could bring it straight to the board. I think
Right.
what we do with the recommendation is up to the board.
Okay.
There's so many things.
So let's do it that way.
Yeah.
Just because I'm watching the clock and we have a busy two items ahead of us.
Because
Okay.
governing board will have so much more time.
Right. So, by the way, for the current board members who are present on this call, it's just a gentle reminder that our board meeting is on Tuesday, June 29, not Thursday, July 1st, and desperately need quorum because we will have no money to spend in July if you don't show up to that meeting, if we can't have that meeting, because we have to pass some financial motions. Nothing to do with planning and zoning, but I see there's a few board members present. So I'm going to be calling each and every one of you. Okay, thank you. So for our applicants, our board meeting also is on Tuesday, June 29, not Thursday, July 1. And I will send you all emails on that as well. Okay, next item. So if you could stop the share.
All right.
Thank you. Our next item, and you guys are welcome to stay unless you don't want to. Our next item is a project update, but it's going to be an action item on Crenshaw Crossing. Case number EMV 2019-5426-SCEA, which you'll explain, and CPC 2019-5425DB density bonus, and boy, MCU, master conditional use permit. SPP is I don't know, specific plan, or an SPR is site plan review, and ZAI is a zoning administrator or something, and a PHP. So you know what, Armin? You're gonna have to explain it all. And I received in the mail today a hearing notice for July 7. I saw that on your presentation too. So surprise, we're gonna have to take an action tonight, and we were gonna have to take an action on June 29th.
Great. We were actually going to request a letter of support and recommendation to support this project from your committee to the full board. If you will allow Jen McLeay from Watt to be a
Co-host, sure. Let me find, there you are, find you in the queue. There we go.
Great.
Thank
So
you.
let me just start
And
off by
introduce yourself, please.
Oh, my name is Armin Ross, and my company is the Ross Group. I'm also president of the Crenshaw Chamber of Commerce, and we've been working with the Watt companies and West Angeles Community Development Corporation on the Crenshaw Crossing project. Jennifer McLeay from Watt is going to walk you through the project. We've been to your committee several times. This will be actually the final update before the hearing that's coming up on July 7th, as you know, because the notices have been given out. This project started many, many years ago, I think back in 2016 or 2015. 2017, and it's gone through a lot of community presentations and meetings and suggestions and several iterations, and we think we have a very, very good project for you now. As you know, the project is on the east and west corners of Crenshaw and Exposition. I believe the east property, which is where the LA Metro station will be, is within the UNNC boundaries.
Correct.
And west site is actually in the West Adams neighborhood council area. So I don't know if your recommendation will be for the entire project or just the portion that's in UNNC, but I know that in the past you have made recommendations on projects that are adjacent to UNNC.
Yeah, Armin, it's called a shared border project. So the real question is going to be, is our southerly neighborhood council going to get involved? The one south of us, but don't answer. I'm just saying it may be that you'll see 3 neighborhood councils weighing in.
And that's fine. So with that little bit of background, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer McLeay from Watt, and she's going to go through all those acronyms that she named off.
Yes, please. And I'd like to point out, because we had to add this other item, I need to get to the third item, the Wilton Place, no later than 8:30. It's now 10:08.
Okay, great. I think
I'd like to get there sooner, but no later than that.
Okay.
We'll do our best to move.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
We'll
sorry
do our
to
best to
box
move
you
through it
in.
quickly.
Sorry.
No problem. I'll very quickly introduce the rest of the team that's on the phone. We have Erica Freeman from West Angeles CDC. They're our co-developer on the project, and Susan Shivarathanan from Mayor Brown, who will be the person who can unscramble all the letters in our entitlement request. So I will direct all entitlement and land use questions to her, but I'll just kick it off. As Armin said, I'm Jen McEllier. I'm a partner with the Watt companies, and I've been working on this project since we won the RFP with Metro. I'm just gonna pull up our presentation here. In 2017, similar to the project that was just presented, we are going to be ground leasing the site from Metro and LA County, and hoping to enter into that ground lease formally once we're fully entitled, which we expect and hope for later this year. So in trying to keep this brief, I've only included the most recent updates. So We submitted our plans to the city in 2019, end of 2019. As Armin mentioned, we've been doing our rounds in the community, basically, I guess that should say Q4 2020, over the last year and a half. And you should have just received the notice that our CEQA document, the SKIA, has gone public in draft form and is available for public comment. And then, as you mentioned, Laura, we have our hearing on July 7th. That's the Joint Hearing Examiner Advisory Agency hearing. And so in advance of the SKIA public comment period and the hearing, we really wanted to focus today's update on the SKIA findings and the entitlement request. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the project, just a very quick recap. This view is looking south down Crenshaw. You'll see here in the lower left-hand corner is West Angeles Cathedral to orient yourself. We're building on both this eastern and western parcel. It'll be in total 401 units of housing, and the ground floor will be 40,000 square feet of commercial, predominantly taken up by a grocery store. We will have some restaurant users. There's a Metro bike hub and 3,000 square feet of community space. We'll also have 502 dedicated parking stalls. Those are subterranean on both sites. And we currently have a 20% affordable housing set aside. That's 80 units. But as we've mentioned in prior meetings, we are still working towards getting to 50% affordable, and explain sort of what the composition of that affordable is. 20% will be at a maximum area median income of 50% of area median income. And then the balance will be at moderate incomes, 80 to 100% of area median income. So that's basically subject to still some funding and subsidy applications that we need in order to get to the higher affordability target, but it's something we're still very committed to pursuing. I'll move forward quickly into the official entitlement ask. So we will be asking for a vesting tentative tract map. That's really to create the airspace for both the affordable housing units as well as separating the residential and commercial spaces. We are processing a sustainable communities environmental assessment. That's our SKIA, the environmental CEQA document. And I'll go into that in a minute. We are asking for we're pursuing the density bonus with 3 incentives and 2 waivers, and that's summarized as a relief from the height limit. We're in a 70-foot height limit. We are asking for an additional 11 feet. On Victoria, we have a 30-foot height limit. We're asking for an additional 4 feet on Victoria. A reduction in the open space requirements, and compact parking spaces, a reduced setback for the parking garage, and a reduced setback for the open space. And I want to remind everyone, just flipping really quickly back to this site, the eastern parcel is on top of metro infrastructure. As Armin mentioned, we're building right on top of the terminus of the LAX Crenshaw line. And part of the requirements and the additional asks really have to relate to the fact that we have a very limited flexibility in our footprint because we are building around this metro infrastructure. So I just wanted to provide that context on the ask. We're asking for conditional use permit for alcohol sales for the grocery store and up to 6 restaurants, although right now we only are programming for 2 restaurants. Permit compliance with the Crenshaw corridor specific plan, and then because of the site of the project, we trigger site plan review. I just went through a bunch of stuff. Laura, would you like me to go through the whole presentation, or should we stop for questions on just the entitlement piece?
You know, I've forgotten what the rest of the presentation looks like. I think it's best to go through I looked at it very quickly.
Okay.
I think it's best to go through the whole presentation. We can float backwards if the questions are on this.
Okay, great. So it's really the last topic to cover is the findings under the CEQA document. Again, we pursued a Sustainable Communities Environmental Assessment, which is a relatively new CEQA pathway that's available to projects that qualify as transit priority projects. And you'll see here in full detail, you have to be near major public transit infrastructure, which we obviously are. There are some minimums and land use consistency that we have to comply with under SCAG's RTP SCS plan, and we have to be at least 50% residential uses. So under the TPP designation, we qualify for a CEQA streamlining process known as the Sustainable Communities Environmental Assessment. And we can successfully utilize this streamlining if we do not create any significant and unmitigated environmental impact. And so the big conclusion here is we did not trigger any significant and unmitigatable environmental impact. What I wanted to spend a minute on is going through all of the areas that are studied under the CEQA process. Just a quick recap and to give you a sense of how these categories are designated. N for no impact, LSI for less than significant impact, and then LSIM, which is less than significant impact once it's been once a mitigation has been incorporated. And I'll leave this screen up for when we go into questions, but you'll see all the different areas of analysis in this table below. And I wanted to call out the LSIM impacts, when again, those are impacts that can be mitigated to a level of less than a level, I'm going to read it again because I'm going to mess it up, less than significant impact with the mitigation. And those were air quality, geology and soils, and noise. And we can go into detail on exactly, what those impacts are and how we plan to mitigate those. But I want to make sure, we get through the whole presentation, which actually ends at this slide, unless anybody has any immediate questions. I have some appendices if we want to go into detail, but given that we are time constrained, I wanted to sort of lay out everything that we wanted to present this evening and use the rest of our time for questions.
Okay, well, oh, I see. So I'm looking at my own screen. So we do have more information about other things if people ask questions on them. Okay.
Correct.
Fine. So why don't we just start with the questions? Anybody who has a question, please raise your hand. Okay, there we go. Taylor. I say, I see no hands. That's not possible. Taylor, go ahead.
So for the corner that's going to have some of the very best transit in Los Angeles, really outside of Koreatown and downtown, the best corner for transit in all of LA, at the intersection of two metro lines, literally on top of a metro line. How do you justify so much parking?
It is a balance. As you may know, under given this location, we have minimal parking requirements, and under the Metro exclusive negotiation agreement, we have maximums that prohibit us from doing more than one parking stall per unit and more than 3 per 1,000. We're adhering with the, we're staying within the Metro maximums, but it is a push-pull between sort of the reality of how people get to commercial uses and retail uses and get to and from work, and the communities that are directly adjacent to this project having grave concerns about overflow parking into their communities. And so we have a lot of feedback and consternation from immediately adjacent neighborhoods that have already experienced parking issues as a result of the EXO line coming into their community, and even greater concerns that people will be parking in the community and taking the LAX Crenshaw line to get to LAX. So it's a balance. Unfortunately, we're in this inflection point where we haven't quite gotten to a world in Los Angeles where people are willing to ditch their cars. So what we have done is at least future-proof the project by building some parking in a way that, let's see if you can see it on the on this drawing. It's very hard to tell, but there's a pool deck that's built on top of part of the parking structure that services the eastern portion of the building. Over time, we've designed it so that parking structure can go away and you can densify the project. We will obviously still have underground parking. Maybe someday that can be retrofitted, but we did the very best we could to sort of meet the divergent needs of building for a future where we hope this will be, you know, entirely serviced in a way where everybody's using public transit, but with respect to the fact that people in adjacent communities are very concerned about other people parking who are coming to this project. So.
Can I ask a very quick follow-up question about that?
Well, Taylor, could you hang on one second, if you don't mind? Jen, did Metro make parking a requirement, or is this sort of the result of all the community meetings?
It's a result of the community meetings. I'm sorry?
Since it was an RFP and you were negotiating.
Correct. I mean, there are, I think if Metro had their druthers, they'd prefer as little parking as possible here, but we got so much community pushback and still are getting pushback even on the parking that we are provided, saying it's not enough, that we're trying to strike a balance between what Metro, you know, would envision for a site on their transit station versus what the community right now is dealing with overflow parking.
Okay, and I interrupted you, Taylor, you go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So that's comforting that you can convert some of the parking. So as someone who does live nearby on Crenshaw in a neighboring community, I would say that I have the opposite concern, that as you put it, grave concerns that there's too much parking. What this will do is bring traffic to our neighborhoods, unsafe streets to our neighborhoods, and it'll undermine the billions of dollars in investments that the city and the county and the state are putting into Metro. So my follow-up question is, do you think that the community members that are expressing these grave concerns are representative and that you're getting a good mix of people, or do you think that your target people that are opposed to public transportation and are requiring more parking? Because what you're saying doesn't really jive with my experience living in this community.
I'd say, and I'd welcome Armin to chime in because he spends a lot of time on the outreach side as well, that we have a very strong cross-section of the community that is very vocal about the parking situation. Everybody from young people to seniors who either are saying, you know, they would prefer to be able to drive to the property to use the commercial and particularly the grocery uses, to people who live in Leimert Park and are concerned that there's just not enough parking for visitors to the project, or people who are using the Metro station who don't want to park at the Metro leased parking structure 2 blocks up. So, you know, I don't think it's a single demographic that is concerned about the parking. It truly is. I mean, if you've participated in any of the Metro hearings that we've had to date regarding our ENA, the parking is always a concern. And as a matter of fact, the first mile, last mile study that Metro did in concert with our project was pulled from the agenda and revisited specifically because of concerns around parking and access to the property. So it's a very, I'd say, one of the biggest topics that's out there. And then the concerns about traffic undermining the use of the project for public transit. I'll just point to the fact that the traffic impacts weren't even to a level of needing to be mitigated. So I think that's probably something that is less of an actual issue.
Okay, so we have a lot of hands. I'm going to move on to Ethan, then John, then Rosie, then Cheryl. Ethan.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, Jen. Thank you for coming out and presenting tonight to the Neighborhood Council. I have a quick question on the mitigations, particularly the mitigations for, I believe one was noise and one was for air quality. Just concerned about the residents that live in that area. There are quite a few that live within a couple of blocks, maybe even actually across the street from the build site. So what are the mitigations for air quality and for noise?
Sure. Susan, would you mind tackling these?
So it's a math problem, Mike, and until this gets resolved and we get enough done. Can you guys hear me?
Uh-oh. Yes.
Okay, good. Hi, this is Susan Shivarajnan. Thanks for the question. So yeah, there were a few project-specific impacts in air quality and noise, and those are just during construction. A couple of the air quality impacts, the mitigations would be to use more low emission vehicles during construction. So what they call tier 4 equipment. And then other kind of best management practices, such as, no idling, watering down, kind of all during the construction activities, things like that. And really, and then the noise as well. There would be constant monitoring during construction for air and noise. For noise, let me just switch to that. There was a project-specific impact, again, during construction, and that was really due to construction activity. So again, there would be a noise monitor during construction, and anytime it would exceed the threshold, they would kind of hit pause and kind of adjust construction equipment, construction activities until they kind of came below the threshold. So those are a few of the mitigations.
Thank you, Susan. I have a quick follow-up question. What is a noise monitor? Is that an actual person, or is that just a machine that monitors decibels?
Yeah, both, right. So they would be placed near sensitive receptors, so along Victoria, right? So I think the sensitive noise receptors here would be the residences along Victoria and east of Bronson. So it would be equipment and then a person monitoring that equipment.
Okay. John?
I just want to support Taylor's comments. It seems like it's too much parking. Everyone's up in arms about the cost of housing, and from my calculus, what portion of the cost of the project is being put into parking? 15%. So it's going to increase the cost of housing. Everyone's jaws drop when the price per unit comes out, and what they don't see is a big chunk of that is building big concrete stalls below grade oftentimes. So I just want to support Taylor and just point out that increases the cost and makes the housing less affordable, especially if the funding is private. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay. I don't think you need to keep responding, Jen, to that one.
I'm sorry?
I don't think
okay.
you need to respond at this point. Rosie.
Yes, I attended about 4 or 5 of the community meetings, and I applaud you for coming to the community, asking the stakeholders what their opinion is, rather than just saying, this is what we're building, deal with it, goodbye. People are not going to give up their cars. We know that. So I do appreciate the parking, and you listen to the stakeholders that are around there, and you seem to be more community involved in some of the other places that are building around the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl. Cheryl. Oh, but you're muted. You have to unmute yourself, please. Cheryl, do you know how to unmute yourself? Because I can't do it for you. No, thank. Cheryl, if you look on your black screen, there should be a line drawn, unfortunately drawn through your microphone. You need to click on that and unmute yourself.
Can you unmute for her? I think is that
I can ask her to unmute, but I can't unmute her. I mean, I can ask her in digital and I can ask her like I'm asking her.
Yeah, you're right.
You can't go to participants and unmute her, Laura?
That is correct. I cannot.
I just checked, Ethan. That is, I can't do it either. It says.
Right.
Okay, got it.
So
Thanks, guys.
I'm trying to figure out.
Wave at her. Rosie, we can't hear you.
No, she can hear me. I think she just doesn't know how to do it.
Oh, okay.
So, so why don't I ask 2 questions and maybe somebody who knows.
Type it in the chat, Cheryl. Type it in the chat.
Oh yeah, Cheryl, type your
I
question.
think that's what she's doing. I see her fingers moving.
Okay, so let me ask. I'm going back to the parking commentary. So first of all, how much of that parking is residential versus the commercial parking, Jen? And then second, I actually went to I've been participating in yet another conversation about electric cars. And the issue with that now is, as projects are reducing the number of parking spaces, it also ends up reducing their ability to provide chargers for cars. At the same time, we're trying to encourage people, if they're going to have cars, to have electric cars. So that's just a comment. I mean, somehow we need to balance all of these things, but how much of the parking is for the commercial versus the residential?
So we have 120 stalls for the commercial. So that's the maximum of 3 parking stalls per 1,000 units of commercial. And I'll say, we're dedicating the vast majority of that to the grocery. In order to attract a grocer, you need parking. And that's really the key anchor and part of the key condition under the RFP was bringing a grocer to the project. For the remaining parking stalls, we are encouraging that people, lease without bringing a car, because we will be at less than 1 stall per unit. There will be units that do not come with parking. We only get half a stall for affordable units. And so we will be, if you do the math, the 502 minus the 120 leaves you at 382. And we'll have 401 units. So we will have fewer parking stalls than we have units. And so what we're doing to encourage people to not bring their cars is we're actually decoupling parking from the rent. And so you can pay less rent if you don't take a parking stall, and you'll be charged more if you need a parking stall or 2 stalls. So it's something that we're doing to encourage people not to bring as much, or not to be so heavily reliant on their cars. Really, as they move towards a carless future. So you'll see, we're in a lot of people's eyes under parking the project. So hopefully that provides a little more context on how the parking is composed.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I attended not just your community meetings, but actually community meetings related to the approval of the West Adams Baldwin Hills Lamert community plan. So longer ago. And the community members who live in North Lamert Park, which includes part of UNNC, the farthest north piece of North Lamert Park is within our boundaries. And the community really physically showed up at City Hall at both the planning commission and then at the city council to complain on the community plan basis about how the increase in density along Crenshaw was going to create their concern, major parking issues in the single family zone neighborhoods right adjacent to it. So this has truthfully been an ongoing concern expressed by neighbors about things that are not yet built. So we won't know the accuracy of their predictions until all of the projects come online. But we also heard objections. There's a condominium project to the east of your building on Exposition Place at 9th Avenue and going west from there. So a little farther east. But the Crenshaw specific plan also did not permit them to provide more than 90% of the required parking. So that the condominium developers had wanted to have guest parking and they were not allowed to. So again, the impact on the community would be, as one might imagine, Thanksgiving Day, when many people who live in the townhomes have Thanksgiving guests and they'll all be in the community. So there's been a lot of this conversation going back 10 years. And I think you're in a tough spot because Taylor and John are correct about the future we're looking towards. So I don't know what we do with that in terms of voting at UNNC. The amount of parking you have is the amount of parking you have. That Metro's approved this? That's a question. I'm sorry. Metro's approved this plan?
This is consistent with the terms of the exclusive negotiation agreement, which basically outline how much parking we can have.
So maybe you should explain what I'm talking when I say Metro's approved, why it matters if Metro's approved.
Correct. So just for those of you, if you're not aware,
something else on her agenda.
For those of you who aren't aware, the land is owned by Metro and LA County. So this site, which used to be the LA County Probation Office, will continue to be owned by Los Angeles County. This site, the land on which we're building, will be owned by Metro, and we're currently owned by Metro and will continue to be owned by Metro. And so we will be entering into long-term ground leases. And because this is publicly owned land, they have set the terms of the development and 4 years ago issued an RFP, which we responded to and were selected as the developer to build on these sites. That RFP was informed by 2 years of prior community engagement and outreach that Metro did that set the guidelines that we bid under. And so a lot of what you're seeing here is the culmination of 2 years of Metro community outreach and then a subsequent 2 years of outreach that we conducted that resulted in an increase of affordable housing and additional changes to the project that really sort of reflect the push-pull that is existing in the community, as Laura detailed. I mean, I personally also agree that I'd like to be building towards a future where on major transit infrastructure, particularly in one of the most networked locations in the entire city, that you're not building parking. And I think it was John who said, parking is a huge component of the cost of real estate development and multifamily development. I also agree, we'd love to be able to use that cost for more community benefit or more affordability. So it's challenging to sort of be at this point where we're not quite there yet. And a lot of people will still deal with the impact sort of in the interim. And because this is a public project, we are very much subject to all the different community voices that are out there.
Sarah, you have a question?
Yes, Jen mentioned this already, so I know that she's aware that a block away is already a Metro parking structure. So I don't see why the hundreds of spots that are already in a multi-story parking structure a block away couldn't be considered as part of the larger available parking in the area.
It's a good point, Sarah. And I think, the feedback that we're getting is that people in the community are already experiencing parking in their streets. They're trying to put together a preferential parking district. I don't believe they've been successful in doing that yet, but I think there was an uptick in parking in the community when the Expo line was completed. And so I think that's driving a large part of it, that when the LAX Crenshaw line opens, that they'll continue to see more parking in the community. And a lot of the feedback is also that people aren't willing to walk the 2 blocks from the parking structure to the site. I can't speak on behalf of all of the people that have provided feedback to us, other than to say, you know, we've received a lot of feedback and we have to take it into account.
Right. Well, to be fair, Sarah, the parking structure you're referring to is covenanted to 3 uses. One is overflow parking for the shopping center at Jefferson and Bronson to Crenshaw at Jefferson. One is, it's also devoted to parking for the church. And then the third is Metro came in after, and it's not covenant, it's a lease, if I'm not mistaken. So, but I will say, one of the requests from the community was to add more Metro parking for the trains in this project, and that was rejected. So this amount of parking, it seems to be more of the compromise, where the request from many community members to also have train parking was not included in the RFP. So, because that was discussed at length at those earlier meetings. So, okay, well, parking seems to be the main thing. Does anybody have comments, questions about other aspects? Okay, so I do have one more. On the noise abatement during construction, we're back to parking. You are, in a sense, you are doing underground parking, correct?
Correct.
So I will say, as a person who lived less than 500 feet from a development that's about to open its doors, but which does have underground parking, the noise of that part of the construction was earth-shattering and daily for an entire summer. And it was 6 days a week because they thought they wanted it to go faster. And it started at 7 every morning. I wonder if, as a mitigation, you don't start at 7 in the morning. I mean, it's just literally earth shaking when they're drilling down. So I'd consider a mitigation that starts it a little later in the day anyway, but it's unavoidable. I mean, when you're digging down, down is going to be noisy and physically shaky. So, you know, how maybe you're the wrong person to ask. Maybe it's your compatriot, Susan.
Yeah. Susan, I don't know if we have. Well, firstly, I fully understand Laura, and I sympathize. If there's any, I guess, solace I can convey is that it's only 1 level subterranean, so it's not as extreme as maybe some other projects that have been going on in the community. But Susan, I don't know if we have times on our construction hours yet.
Yeah, I have to look specifically on this project, but there are typical construction hours that the city has. So we can look into that.
And I'm not necessarily asking for the whole length of construction, and I get up at 7, so it didn't wake me exactly, but it woke other people. I mean, 7 a.m. and underground parking drilling. I just wonder how you mitigate that. I don't expect to have an answer tonight. I'm putting out a question.
Okay, we will follow up.
Okay, anything else from anyone else? Because I'm looking at the clock. John, bringing you back as you're mute.
I was scratching my head.
Well, that too. Well, I mean, in other words, we have been on and off looking at this project now for a couple of years, but here we are. There's a hearing on July 7th. And I can't go to that hearing saying, oh God, they've never come to us. Can you put off making a decision? Because that would not be true.
So I guess, I mean, we can make a motion, whatever that motion will be. I mean, I think we've heard a lot about parking, which is normal, typical for a project coming to us. How do we want to proceed to support and concept except for, support and concept, relook at this, do not accept the concept at all? I mean, I think there are levels of support while also expressing concern. I think we don't have to just say, yes, we support, and divide us into supporters and non-supporters. So,
well, previously, and I haven't heard much discussion of it tonight. Previously, before this iteration, there had been a lot of criticism that there wasn't enough affordable housing. So it seems I've heard nothing about that tonight. So are we all good with the levels of affordable? And I would say meeting, the missing middle. Looks like you're, the other portion of quote affordable is for the missing middle, the 80% of median income. And then, so it sounds like it's not a big contention. There was also lots of questions at the beginning in all of the meetings, our own and other public meetings, about community use and making available some of the commercial potentially to local businesses. And I'm hearing none of that tonight. So that seems to be resolved. So it sounds, and no one's mentioned anything about the design, which we didn't really look at. So if the only issue is parking, then John, I don't know quite what to do with it, because as a neighborhood council, we're supposed to do our best professional approach and also represent the concern of our stakeholders. So our stakeholders' concerns range all the way from why is there any parking to please have twice as much as you're providing. So I don't know what to do with that. I'm sort of exaggerating the ends, maybe.
So,
and knowing that the RFP and the actual owners want this amount of parking and have asked this applicant, the project builders, developers, to meet those goals. So.
What's the dilemma that you're having, Laura?
No, I'm saying, what do we do with this? Do we?
We need to make a motion. Someone needs to make a motion.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Do we just, move to approve it as presented? Do we say we're concerned, although we support it as presented, we're concerned there's too much parking and would ask them to see if there can be less?
I think we also can acknowledge that this is a conceptual design. This is early entitlements. There'll be changes. I think we can ask for it to come back as it goes through real design for updates on materials and color and elevation. I mean,
are you typing that, John?
I'm not making I'm just making a suggestion. So
I understand.
I will type
I'm not
ideas.
What you're saying, you're talking fast.
I will type ideas, but just knowing the entitlement process to say, oh, we don't like the stagger of that windows. Can you stagger in the other direction? That's not today, that's years from now or next year or something. So I think we can ask that the applicant return during phases of design for further input. But that's why I was thinking a motion for the design and concept with the following concerns.
Jen, let me ask you this. This is primarily the vesting tract map, or is it everything? And by that, I mean, when they approve a vesting tract map, they're approving, quote, the box. But is this approval also for the specific amount of parking and the specific breakdown of affordability versus market rate housing, or is it the box? For the hearing we have on July 7th.
Not the affordability, but Susan, I'll have you clarify the other items, parking and the box.
Yeah, so July 7th is the joint advisory agency hearing officer hearing, and it basically kicks off a series of hearings for the full approvals of this project. At this joint hearing on July 7th, it will be for the tract map, but it will also, collect testimony for the entitlements that will end up going to CPC down the line. We don't have a date for that yet. It's a few months out. But this is the package, that will be moving through. You're right, there could be some tinkering with, some design and materials and colors and things like that from now until CPC. We're working with planning department on that, but but as far as like units and parking, I think this is pretty much it. After this joint hearing, we go to council, city council for the SKIA. So we need city council to act on the SKIA, the environmental document, and then the entitlements go to CPC. So it's kind of like a 3-series.
And is there any chance that CPC will reduce the parking? Because I know they're very not fond of over parking projects. So
Right.
is that something that might happen? CPC stands for City Planning Commission.
Right. Yes. Commission has been known to reduce parking. You're right. Yeah. I will add, we are obviously providing bike parking, and we are in compliance with the specific plans, 90% max as well. So, yeah, you're right. Commission could ask to reduce parking.
Okay, so John has posted one thought, which is that we move to, suggest to the governing board, recommend to the governing board that we approve this in concept, but request that the developer return to the community during future phases of design. And maybe we should add, I'm gonna write, maybe we should add that there have been concerns expressed that this project may be overparked. Although there's been concerns in the community that it's
underparked. So they're both there, so they can't.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know.
I think also, can we make a statement? I mean, this is can we reach consensus, at least to get to a motion and a vote, that the level of intensity of this project, the 400 units, the height, the just intensity at this corner is an okay thing for the community?
Yeah. Donna has her hand raised. Let's hear what Donna has to say and then go back to your thought there.
I'm awfully concerned that we're speaking for a community we don't live in. And when you're talking about the parking issue, that came strongly out of the area, the communities close by this project. And for us to say it's overparked, it's fine because we live north of Venice, north of Adams, north of Washington, and some around Jefferson. But Leimert Park is getting hit bad.
Right.
I just had to say that.
Yeah.
And speaking for them, it's very hard.
I understand, Donna. No, I'm saying I really understand. I've been to those other hearings. And again, I don't know about the people. By that I mean I haven't heard from personally and haven't necessarily seen in a room the people on the west side of this project, but for sure the people in North Leimert Park have definitely expressed that they want more parking, not less. Rosie.
Didn't Jen mention something about there's a possibility that some of those parking spaces would turn into some type of housing?
Correct.
Okay, so while you're putting in there that not we all, but there's issues about the parking, don't forget to put that in there also, that it's already been talked about, that she's already considering other alternatives. So it's not just one-sided.
Yeah. Okay, we need a motion to move forward on, because based on the clock, we got to move forward the time.
Okay, well, is it being added or is it not being added?
I don't know. I mean, I mean, I did that thing about there's been, support. John just posted something else. So what John has posted would be a proven concept. I'm going to go backwards, but request the developer return to the community during future phases of the design, skip what I wrote. And then he's added support the density and intensity of the development at this site in the community. And John, what do we say, if anything, about parking?
Boy, I don't know how we could reach consensus without gumming up the emotion. I
Why
think
don't we just say we can't reach consensus on parking? We do not have it.
it is just a recommendation to the board. The board will act on its own.
Exactly. So, okay, so we got to do a motion.
So Laura, since we don't have a consensus on the parking, why don't we just leave the parking out and just talk about support of the density?
That's what I think. Density, intensity. I think we can. I agree with you, Ethan. I think we just leave it out. And
this is a public meeting, so anybody the public meeting in the future, I believe, on the 7th. So anybody that has concerns can voice their concerns at that meeting.
Well, as well, exactly. That's exactly right. And at CPC in the future. So I think what I'm understanding from the hearing notice, which my God is page after page, so it's really hard to understand even the hearing notice, is that this is a hearing where Ellen Como will act as the staff person on behalf of all these other people and take testimony that then goes forward to the City Planning Commission. And he's not issuing a determination. Is that correct, Jen or Susan?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so there is the ability to write him letters as well. So the community has opportunity to do more, but the neighborhood council does not. I mean, we're done on, we're basically done on June 29th for the moment, done for the moment. But let me put this back in the chat more cohesively. So you see what I just put in there, John? Will that work?
Move to recommend the governing board.
It's silent on parking.
So I think parking is included on density intensity. And so, but I think because we're not, I think that's accepting of where we are. That's 500 stalls. It's not going to make me and Taylor happy. It's not going to make other people happy either. Because it's too much, too little. So it's still a significant amount of parking. It's 500 stalls, which is huge. So I'm guessing that we can just vote to support just to vote the intensity and intensity of the development.
Let me just be clear. I will, no matter what else happens, make a note at the governing board that we don't have consensus on parking. I mean, that's very clear to me. And I don't want Sarah or Taylor's voices or yours, John, silenced, even though you won't be sitting there at governing board voting, because a month later, Taylor, John, and Sarah will be voting, right, going forward. Jen, for explanation, we have new board members here, but they're not board members really yet. So I will make a note to the board that we don't have consensus on the amount of parking. We don't have to vote on that either. So, but it's 8:38. We must vote on something now. So
I'm going to move. Can I make the motion?
Absolutely.
I'm going to move that we recommend that the governing board support in concept, not approve, but support in concept the project as presented, including the density and intensity of the development at this site in the community, but request that the developer return to the community during future phases of the design and seek future support, continuing support, not just checking in, but just support and input.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I guess I want it. Because we haven't been able, it's a huge project. And for us,
John, I'm just trying to figure out if you're not retyping it, changing the word approve to the word support.
Yep. And then tacking on when the returns to seek future support and input during future phases of the design.
Future input and support. Okay. This still doesn't, I mean, is that close enough? I can pull it all back out.
Yeah, I think it's close.
That works, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I second John's motion.
Okay, but I'm going to change the word approve to support. To seek input and further support. Okay, I've got to repost this darn thing, maybe correctly, and then letting us move on. Okay, tell me if that is it, that John moved and.
Return to seek future design, future to seek input and further support, and support the density. Probably I put support density intensity further up, but it's in there and we can rearrange it. So,
Okay.
Yep, that's good.
Ethan?
That works for me.
Okay, there we go. And everyone can see that. And then again, for anyone may vote. I prefer that Armin and Jen and Susan don't vote, right? Because it kind of isn't fair. So if you are in favor of this motion, please either raise your little blue hand or your reactions or wave yes. All in favor, just raise your blue of a motion. And then John has waved yes, Laura's waved yes. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 9 votes. Okay, if you could take your hands down, who's voting negative in opposition? If anyone's voting in opposition. Okay, Sarah, oh, hand went down. Okay, so with no opposition, this moves forward to the board, and I've got the motions in the chat. So again, Armin, we will not be spending this amount of time at the board. This is a special board meeting. I don't know how we're gonna move this fast, but we're supposed to try and have a board meeting that's an hour and a half or max 2 hours long on Tuesday, the 29th.
Okay, we will be there at the meeting, Laura, and just let us know if Jen should be prepared to make any type of a presentation, but we will be there to answer any questions.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Taylor, the next
Thank
item
you.
on the agenda was a brief conversation with you. Is it okay to put that off?
Yep.
Up to you.
Yep. We can put it off to the end of this meeting or put it off to a future meeting.
Either way, I'd like to do the Wilton Place thing first.
Let's do it.
Okay. And then if we have time, come back to you. Just because I do see on this call the appellant on the Wilton Place item. So, and it's getting late. So basically, we don't have the applicant here, but what's happened is that there's a project, a TOC project at 1537 South Wilton Place that we've been dealing with for a couple of years. I'm almost saying was, as if it's gone, because it almost is, a historical mansion at that location within the Angeles Vista character residential overlay zone. We've had many discussions about should this project have been vested, should it not have been vested, but essentially what happened is it went to Planning Commission, and at Planning Commission, the commission rejected the design, but approved that there could be a new 21 unit, I think it is, project at that location, but rejected the design. So, and if I'm not mistaken, that was an appeal. So the appellant won in part and lost in part, and then it was appealed to City Council. This all happened. Jean, I think I know you're here, but UNNC and West Adams Heritage and the next door neighbor senior citizen appellant were in City Hall for that, what was to be the hearing on the day City Hall closed down for COVID. So we made it as far as City Hall. We were on our way on the 3rd floor to the hearing when we see the entire commission walking towards us because they had just been told to go home. And luckily we did not get COVID. Anyway, so then it was heard on Zoom later, and that was a result. So we appealed to City Council. Everything's been a mess, as you know, with COVID. So the prior District 10 had fully supported the position that the project should not be vested and the whole thing should be rejected. But they left office, and before we got to the actual City Council hearing, the building had not been secured, and not surprisingly, it caught on fire. And there was major damage to it, and it was unsecured. So UNNC took a pretty strong position at that point that A, we were angry about the lack of security, and then B, that it needed to be completely redesigned to be consistent with the character residential overlay zone design guidelines with a thorough review by neighborhood experts. Mark Ridley Thomas, our council member, also said at that hearing it needed to be further redesigned. Nothing happened, and all of a sudden we're being asked to comment on that design. So Jean, I'm going to ask you to make a few comments while I attempt to find and share the screen of the new design.
I'll be very brief.
And would you introduce yourself, because people don't necessarily know who you are?
Yes, this is Jean Frost. I'm Vice President of West Adams Heritage Association. I'm also on a neighboring neighborhood council. In this regard, West Adams Heritage worked with the elderly neighbor, Virginia Stevenson, and her son to attempt to save the building and get development incorporated with the building, with building additionally in the rear. And this absolutely is not something you would want to have built in a community planning implementation overlay. And I think an architect, even with the skills of John Arnold, would have trouble taking this mass and making it compatible. So I think the most critical things are that the front yard setback at least conform to that which is the prevailing setback and that which is required by the community plan implementation overlay. One of the other unfortunate steps is that planning deemed this project vested prior to the implementation of the community plan implementation overlay. It's most unfortunate. It's the kind of project you wish the CPIO would have had a chance to redesign. It's way too massive for the site. It's impossible to make this fit in. But given that at least I think the front yard setback is one of the key issues, even if it requires a reduction of the mass somehow by reducing the number of bedrooms. Window articulation might be something that would assist in softening how it presents itself to the street, and perhaps more compatible materials, but it really is a challenge. And it's where we are now. It was a very difficult path with Mrs. Stevenson and with the council office at the time, but this is where we are today. And mitigation should be required, as tough as possible, yet realistic and pragmatic.
So it's hard to tell with any of this, but this building is designed with a 20-foot setback. All of the adjacent properties up and down the street are setback. Well, one's 36, one's 37, another's 37, another's 34. 34, another is 36 and a half, and another is 41, and this one's 20. It also has a 17-foot rear yard. So John, one of the questions I wonder, there's reduced setbacks on either side. So the fire department will not be able to take a truck to the back. So is there a reason why it has to have 17 feet in the back? Could the whole building be pushed back to a large extent to help us get a front yard setback? I mean, I understand it would require a variance, but that aside, would that be?
I can't speak to the fire department. I'd have to bring out a measure and see where the 150 feet, that's a future thing that they might run into snags and require a redesign anyway for practical purposes for DBS. I don't see an issue with reducing the rear yard. That rear yard is 15 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 for the height of the building. So it's, I agree with Jean. You know, I'm the first one to say density and development. This is for only 21 units. It's really intense, and the units are large. And yes, to answer your question, I do think it could be pushed back, but there's so many. This requires so much study to pick it apart. I don't even know where to begin, including the design. I mean, it's
right. Well,
I don't even know where to start.
Right. Well, I will say our exact language previously, I mean, we voted on this. So I'll just read it out loud for everybody. What we voted was, I'm having trouble because I'm in the middle of the screen share. I hope you're not seeing the chat. Are you? Are you seeing just the apartment building at the moment, you guys?
No, we're just seeing a blank box at the time.
Okay, I am stopping the share so that, because my problem is I'm trying to do too many things at once. So what UNNC voted on February, first Thursday in February, whatever the date is, that was that we would reiterate, UNNC Governing Board reiterates its previous action regarding the new development at 1537 South Wilton Place, which was to support the appeal and oppose the project, and strongly suggest that the project be redesigned and or revised for comprehensive compliance with the South LA CPIO Character Residential Overlay Zone design guidelines with a thorough review by neighborhood experts, representatives, city staff, and the CPC, which in fact was also what Mark Ridley Thomas' motion said. This was back in February. So that passed unanimously, 20 yes, 0 no, and 2 people were ineligible. For those who are not familiar with this, in part the problem is that this is not a project that could have been built in the past, only with the TOC, and it will never be allowed to be built in the future in this neighborhood because we have the character residential overlay. So this will be a one of a kind in the middle of the block, in the middle of the overlay zone, and no other developer will ever be able to do that. Also, as John pointed out, there's 1/3 of the units are 3 bedrooms, and these are luxury units with big master suites with walk-in closets and large bathrooms, plus 2 more bedrooms. I will say, because there's an affordable component, 3 of the units will be affordable, and 1 of those large units would be among the affordable ones. I am not sure, and maybe John, you know this, under all of the current state housing rules, I think we cannot ask them to redesign and lose units, but are we able to ask them to lose bedrooms to make the units smaller?
It's only density. Density is the unit count, not the unit size or the bedrooms. So I would say, yes, that is true. We could ask for less intensity of mass without losing units.
Okay, so
also, if it would be possible to have the front building, the front 2-story, and have it step back and then have the other stories further away from the front, if that's feasible.
Right. Well, I would think a really good architect, I don't think they have, oh, I can't say this, we're being recorded. The architect had not been very willing to work with the community. I mean, again, we'd seen a earlier version. The only reason we're seeing the version, I can reshare it, but the version we just looked at is more palatable than the original version, which was so wrong that the planning commission, which never rejects a design, rejected it. So, so it was just, I'm not even going to bother to show everybody that, but Councilmember Ridley Thomas said they needed to redesign, and in conjunction with the community and community experts, not everybody, but they haven't done so. So what we're looking at is the same design that was submitted in January. So I think my suggestion would be that, number one, that they have failed to do a new design in conjunction with community expert, as was the council motion. And two, they should set back this project consistent with the prevailing setback on that block. And three, if feasible, also have transition height so that the front would match the heights on the block and then go up from there after the first, whatever the CPIO already requires. I mean, in other words, this does not fit the design guidelines of the CPIO. Also, the reason the Planning Commission was allowed to reject the design is that because they're asking for all the incentives, they have to comply with design guidelines. And the municipal code doesn't say which design guidelines, just design guidelines. Michael.
Yeah, help me out, guys. This came before us in February and we rejected what was presented, yes?
Correct.
And so what we're looking at now, is there any change in what we rejected in February?
No, but for some reason, the planning department staff seems to think this is a quote new design, and they, for whatever reason, there's been multiple emails on this in the last 10 days. The planning staffer seems to think this is a new design, and it's the identical one that council rejected after a different one was rejected by the planning commission. So I think that's why we're redealing with it. So frankly, I even today wrote staff one more time. Are you sure you're sending me the correct plans? This is the same thing as last January, but the council action was in February. It's even dated January. So I don't know what to say.
Well, I have a question. Can we call out the planner publicly in this meeting? Can you name that person?
Probably not wise, but
well, I can name the person who's acting as if it's new, but it may be that she's under orders too. So I don't think that that's very.
Yeah, I would say that's. I would say it's probably not negligence, but it's probably coming from somewhere else.
Well, you know, it was a kind of tongue-in-cheek suggestion, but
yeah,
this is a waste of our time at this point. Don't you agree? That we're reviewing something that's bureaucratically.
It's, you know why it's not a waste of our time, Michael? The darn house burned. It didn't just burn the day before the city council was gonna, or a couple days before the city council was gonna act. It's burned twice more.
Okay, so you mentioned that earlier. When we were talking that this
meaning it's like you can come to whatever conclusion you may wish to. You can probably assume you know what my conclusion is.
Yes.
So in the meantime, Mrs. Stevenson, that's the senior citizen next door, was awakened 2 weeks ago, pounding on her front door. The homeless people were trying to make sure she was up and would get out of her house because they were afraid her house would burn too. This was the third fire. So we're in this horrible situation where the house we've been trying to save, meaning as a community, really is going to have to go. There's been.
Okay, let me understand. Please just bear with me.
Now they want it, but the easiest way for it to get a demolition permit is with an approved design. They technically can't issue the demolition permit until the design is approved. And they're trying to now push forward that push it forward that way so a regular demolition permit can be issued rather than a nuisance abatement permit, which is, I would rather go that way because then there might be some punishment.
So do
But
we
that's
have?
not, but if this was a great design, I wouldn't have just
Right.
said that. So
Right, I understand that. So do we have any leverage with the present developer? Is he under any obligation to redesign?
yes, but they just haven't done so.
So
And Jean, you're muted at this point.
I think also it's not a waste of time because we did get the council member support in February. So the council member, I think, is leaning, if not more than lean, it might be just saying, guys, the neighborhood council is correct. What are you doing? And there might be enough motion, inertia there, movement there to push back on it. So I think we should reaffirm our vows from February and then add some specific ideas just to prod them along, just to say, increase the front yard, decrease the unit size so to decrease the mass, and then use that decrease in mass to step the building back from the street to lessen the impact on the character residential overlay that exists on the street.
Okay, last comment. So all of those things to mitigate the current design, we can make suggestions on. But what we are stuck with is the development, no matter what, although maybe not in its present form.
I'm going to say yes. That is
Okay.
probably a tough hill to fight with the current climate, and also that they were already vested, quote, and that was the issue with this too.
Right, that's what I thought I heard. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
So,
Thank
but
you.
I think there's still political will to get it to change some. As Laura said, it's never going to happen
And
again.
Jean, if I understand technically, there's no ability, and I'm not talking about money, there's no real ability for any community member to file suit over CEQA on this one because the house is pretty much gone, right?
Well, it was a little, it isn't a very strong CEQA suit because of the murkiness of the designation, the dispute among experts, and what has transpired so far in terms of it becoming a hazardous site. There's really,
right,
that would prolong this for like 2 years. And I don't think that's the councilman's goal or the neighborhood council's goal.
Or Virginia, I don't think Virginia wants
or
this
Virginia
to continue to
Stevenson's.
burn, yes.
Before us are awful choices. I think this neighborhood council has a good faith to respond to the support of the current councilman in redesign. I think you've come up with some direction of design. I wish it wasn't such an awful building, but it's not in the hands of a particularly talented architect. And if it only the mass and the side and the front yard would be a big step. And I still think the articulation of the facade is something that could be worked on, but that's kind of like a small part of it. I think you guys are on your way to a recommendation, and I think your councilman would expect a recommendation, and then it's up to the developer to respond and do it, or then you have yet another battle.
So John, I see what you had put in the chat. Is that a motion?
Well, it's a motion, but then to address your suggestion and also Jean's suggestion, which I think are both good, I agree. I mean, I hate to judge my peers, but this project is not in good hands. There's no design there really, and I think if the mass was made less intense, that would start to lead to at least relief. That doesn't need to rely on pastiche of a brick pilaster at the corner and weird color changes. So what can't be done with good design might be mitigated somewhat with at least reducing the bulk and mass of the building.
With the number of times it's burned, I mean, maybe we could convince the developer that it's cursed.
Well,
and they'll say it's bad luck and we shouldn't build the building.
I do
wish
how could it possibly burn that many times?
Maybe he's behind the fires.
What? Shocking, Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Shocking. I'm shocked
Sorry,
to
guys.
discover there might be arson going on here.
I misjudged the room. My fault.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing. The developer did not light a match, but he may as well have. There is no security. The house was a beautiful house when he bought it, and he abandoned it. I think he basically thought that he was going to be able to do this fast, and for lots of reasons he wasn't able to do it fast, including COVID. I mean, in other words, many delays on hearings, and he just let it be, let a group of homeless people live there, and then fires started. And
Or
I don't
encouraged it.
I can't personally say that, but again, you know my feelings, because he never secured the property. I have to tell you that after the first fire, I went to the site with somebody else. I did not personally go onto the site. I stayed talking with the next door neighbor, but the person I was with went onto the site with a camera and went up to the front door, and the door opened, and the homeless guy said, "Come into my home. You're welcome to be here. It's my house." Of course it must, but he was invited in to take the photo. So, I mean, that's the situation we have. It's not good that these people are still living there, despite the fact that half the house is gone, and it's crumbling, it's sooted, it's been on fire, and they're still living there, and the owner knows it. So, I mean, in other words, I wish the city took a stronger stance on the stick side so we could get our carrot. The carrot being whatever, the full redesign, but the stick being, and we're going to do a scorched earth motion, and you won't be able to build anything for 5 years, and go from there on the negotiating. But they're not in the mood to do that either. Okay, John, your motion.
I am typing something.
And Jean, go ahead.
I don't know what condition the stained glass windows are in, but they are, as I understand it, very significant if that can be saved and donated to a museum.
Right. The main stained glass window is smashed to smithereens by the fire department. The other leaded glass and stained glass windows were in fine shape after the first fire. I have no clue as to their shape after 2 more fires.
So I'd like to make the following motion. The UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee moves to request that the UNNC board strongly reaffirm the motion by UNNC in February 2021, including bringing the project to the community for design review, and demand that specific design changes be made, including increasing the setback, reduce the unit size intensity to reduce the building mass, and step back the front of the building to lessen the impact on the streetscape of the character residential overlay.
John, would you add prevailing setback?
Yep, I will take that.
If you want to wait a second, you can even do the math and specify the setback. I mean, in other words, if I take the other ones.
John, should maybe you have some language in there that we are reiterating our objections from February?
That's what I said. I'm sorry.
I said that we are reiterating our objections from the February meeting with the addition of the comments that have been made this evening.
That's what I said.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was distracted.
Strongly reaffirm the motion by UNNC in February 2020.
Thank you. My wife came in the room. I'm sorry I missed part of it.
Spouses, they like that. Okay, so I added prevailing.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 222 divided by 6 equals. So the prevailing average setback is 37.1 feet. John, if that.
Prevailing is not average. Just leave the word prevailing.
Okay.
That's better than. That's better than your not.
All right, that's fine.
So I mean, it's just to show our intent. Whether that happens or not, that's
right.
Who knows what's going to happen? But I think I'd like to say strongly demand. We should be angry at this point because nothing was done.
Well, basically, they didn't do what they were asked to do from February now till June. and we're suddenly hit with a, oh my God, we have a deadline. And it's like, so, okay. So you've made the motion. So motion by John Arnold. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yeah. Multiple seconds.
Oh, I did. Who else seconded?
That's fine.
I think Michael.
Michael.
Michael or Blake, toss up.
He buzzed in. Michael buzzed in first.
Okay. I will just say third, Blake. So Blake, this is right a couple of houses down from the one that did get saved because of the CPAO 1527.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a strange situation all the way around. Okay, so the motion, I understand the motion, and there is really no such thing as a third, by the way, if anyone knew. But essentially, we're recommending the governing board that it reaffirm strongly what we already voted on unanimously in February, and bring the darn project to the community for real design review, demand specific design changes be made, including increasing the setback to the prevailing, reduce the unit size intensity to reduce the building mass, and step back the front of the building to lessen the impact on the streetscape in the character residential overlay. And by that, step back means the first portion has a lower height than the rest, correct? I mean,
correct.
Fine. Okay, that's the motion. It's been moved, it's been seconded, it's been thirded.
I call the question.
Yes, calling the question. All in favor of this motion, please do raise your hand if you can, or your blue hand, or your reaction hand. Okay, so Jean, you are allowed to vote, but perhaps you should not. Okay, and you're muted anyway. Okay, I see 3 blue hands, 3 physical hands. That's 6 out of 9. Jean is not voting, and I guess a couple other people are not voting. Okay, well, so that motion passes as well. Okay.
We ask if anyone objects, just so we have it on the
I
record.
am so sorry. Does anyone object and votes no? Donna, is your hand meant to go down? Donna? Was, oh, there she goes. Okay, would anybody like to vote against this motion?
I see none.
I see nothing. Okay, so shall we go back to Taylor and have that quick conversation about bye, Jean. Transit.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Jean.
luck. This is a real tough process. Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Thanks. Taylor, back up. So sorry. Just
Hello.
So we've obviously approved and appointed you to a mobility and transportation subcommittee to this committee. I think what we need to quickly talk about, but then the little homework is preparing some sort of missions, what's this committee going to do? And as a subcommittee, you can have separate meetings. You don't need to have them monthly. What you cannot do is have more than 6 board members present, because it's not a legislative body under the Brown Act. So if there's ever a time when you want to have a big meeting, we just jointly have it with this committee, and then it's all good. So that's the technique of running a subcommittee. Am I saying that right?
So to be clear, there shouldn't be more than 6 people ever at the committee, or there shouldn't be 6 people who are also on the UNNC board.
You can have 4,000 people just as long as there's not more than 6 board members. So the language is, I mean, if you look at our regular agendas, I'm going to find it. On this agenda, it'd be like page 3, but we run this on all of our agendas, this language. All UNNC stakeholders this is not about subcommittees, it's about standing committees, are invited to participate in the UNNC standing committee meetings. UNNC appoints the committee chairs and co-chairs annually. The positions are open to all stakeholders. Per our practice and policy, all stakeholders present at a standing committee, including members of the board, are considered to be members of that committee for the duration of the meeting, blah, blah, blah. And this is all taken under Brown Act, California Open Meetings Act, Ralph M. Brown Act, sections 54950 through 54963, and specifically section 54952B, which says that standing committees are legislative bodies, and in accordance with that section, point 2, C6, because there's legislative bodies, because they're standing committees, nothing prevents the attendance of the majority of members of the board or the legislative bodies in an open and noticed meeting of that committee. So that's Brown Act shit. Oh, stuff. 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 Oops, I know we're being recorded. But what happens is a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee of the board, there's two different things, are not standing committees by that definition. So therefore they cannot have more than 1/2 of quorum of the board. So our quorum is 13, half of that is 6, right?
Got it. Makes
So
sense.
so if you're going to have a standalone subcommittee meeting, which you're welcome to, we just need to be careful that no more than 6 board members, and you'll be one, are present at that meeting. If it's a issue you want, if it's a bigger issue than that, then all we do is have it as a part of our regular standing committee. So we do an agenda that says Planning and Zoning Committee, including the subcommittee, blah, 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 and we in effect have a joint meeting, and then all is good. So that's just, so to the extent that you want to start having some meetings to even plan a mission statement, and you want to call some of your fellow board members and say, do you want to be on this committee? Do you want to come? And when do you want to meet? And then you just tell me and we set up a Zoom meeting, and I'm the Zoom host. We use the UNNC protocols. I turn it on. I walk away if you've already got 6, meaning I'll turn it on, but I won't be there. And you develop a mission, more better idea of what the committee would be doing. But I think in general, it will be looking at transit and mobility. I don't know. I mean, in other words, so that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Do you have 1 minute or I mean, however much time you have for me to share a document with you that I've already drafted?
That's no problem. Let me make you a co-host.
This is a very rough draft. Nobody has given their opinion on it.
Sure.
I did send it to you and to John in a reply to an email you had sent about the transportation demand program.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I ended up.
No
I'm well now, but I was sick I was very upset, sick with a common cold for a week, and it's sort of like, how did I get it? I wear a mask. I don't go anywhere. I'm still staying safe at home. I use hand sanitizer.
I got a cold last week too, and I still have a lingering cough, and I'm really upset.
It's like, but I know I'm anyway. So I've missed a lot. I missed a lot for a week. Sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. I don't think there's anything urgent. So I just this is the doc I started working on. So just a mission statement. I was thinking these are actually the same ideas that I shared in the wider meeting, which was learn, inform, the 2 sides of the same coin. Get information from the community, get information from government agencies, and then give everybody information as well. Have agencies present information to people that want it, but effectively a clearinghouse of information. And then advocate, this fits along with the done goal and remit of a neighborhood council, which is to advocate on behalf of people in the neighborhood. I think effectively what this means is largely looking at projects that are being proposed and then writing motions of support for those projects that are being proposed, either probably most likely proposed by LADOT or Metro, potentially projects that various advocacy groups are working on. There are a lot of bus advocacy groups, walking, biking advocacy groups. So an opportunity for them to share what they're working on and advocating for, and to offer motions of support, or to not, or to offer motions of anti-support, I suppose. So then the kind of vision that I was writing down, so like what kinds of things do we support? Like we need to have some kind of clear rubric for what things we say yes to and what things we decline to support. So safe, I think is a pretty big one. Safety first. I actually took these mostly from the Metro website and the Metro's goals. So safety is one of their main goals, and equity is one of their main goals. I thought that accessibility is pretty obvious. It might be covered by other ones. Sustainability, I think, is the big advantage of public transportation. Walking, biking, those kinds of things. Hard to not put that on there. Convenient maybe is not a good one, but I think that's something that obviously everybody wants when they think of transportation. I put some details here, but this is kind of where my head was at. Maybe 5 is too many. Maybe safe, equitable, sustainable is sufficient, and then we can say that the other ones are part of that. So then for actually specific activities, these are basically things that I mentioned: host people, do surveys, draft motions of support. And then I have potential priorities, so just things off the top of my head that I think fit in this vision of safety, equity, accessibility, sustainability, and convenience. Biggest one I think is better buses, and I wrote some thoughts on what that means. And then the other biggest one, in my opinion, is probably safe, accessible, and pleasant sidewalks. And then other ones that I talked a little bit less about: reducing traffic deaths, bicycle safety, more frequent and faster e-line service, and then working on the accelerating the northern extension of the Crenshaw, which I think is due to open in 2047, which is long ways away. Be nice if that happened sooner. So this is all just draft. This is kind of
Right.
what I was thinking of. I think the biggest ones to answer first are probably the mission and vision sections, and then everything else will kind of flow from there. Once we know what we're trying to do and what it is that we care about and that we want to support, then the actual activities that we do and the specific types of projects that we want to get involved in, I think, will follow naturally.
Right. So one of the things that we had talked about a lot at UNNC 5-6 years ago, when we had a bicycle advocate, somebody who was with Streets something, is a bicycle advocate. I'm thinking of Michael McDonald.
There's Michael McDonald, yeah. And
Yeah,
also
but
the other guy.
well, the point is, the phrase we used all the time that we supported was multimodality. I mean, in other words, that we support that. So somehow I think that's kind of, I don't think we sunsetted that idea. So, if there's a way to build on that, I think you're addressing all the elements, but maybe near the top, say, something with our purpose or goal is to support how do you say that? Multimodal? John, help. Taylor, help.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
But you know
heard
what
that
I'm
on
talking about. I mean, it's the multi thing. But here's the other thing. Growing out of our environmental committee is this whole thing with the electric cars and having enough charging stations. So I ended up being on I got looped into an interesting email thread between the neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance electric car girl, Lisa Hart, who had come to our meeting. But LADWP, I mean, she is in with all those people at the city, and she copied me as they were conversing about the one little question that I asked because a tenant had asked me, which is, how can I buy an electric car if I can't charge it because the place where I live does not have off-street parking? So I can't put a charger on my unit because I can't bring my car there. So how do we get more electric car chargers? And the end result that I was told is, the city's thinking about it, and there's funding this year to install 10 electric chargers in each of the 15 council districts, so that each council member is going to tell LADWP where to put 10 chargers. And I'm thinking, 10? That's not very many. I mean, 10 times 15, 100. I mean, so the question is that part, do we keep something like this, that conversation in environmental committee, or do we bring it to you? If it's on the agenda, environmental, do you just go there? I mean, in other words, where does that fall?
So I think it falls, I think we can go on. I think I like that Taylor said potential priorities. I think if we had 3 hours right now, we could probably increase that list to 4 and 5 times that. Electric car, I mean, that's an equity thing. So we're saying, so people who live in less, not luxury housing can't have electric cars. And I think so they're all, I think I like the visions a lot, because I think all the things that we can come up with can be plugged into those visions.
Got it.
So I'm good with, I'm not including obviously the potential priorities. I think that will come out of once the committee's established, to start having things that we have goals, measurable achievements. So, and I think we can agree to those once the committee starts forming. Otherwise, this is the Taylor Fife show, which is great, but.
Oh yeah, no, I was not making any comment about this isn't good. Trust me, it's really good. I'm just saying I got looped into a conversation that would not have normally looped me in, but just because I asked a simple question, how do tenants get their cars charged?
And it's a great question. We're considering putting a car charger in our office so our employees who live in apartments can get an electric car and charge it at the office. So all these things, but I think we can, so that might be an advocacy for businesses in our zone to have car chargers in their parking lots requirement.
Oh, our economic development committee. Okay, so we get to intersect all our committees.
Oh, why not?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I hope we have an ability to have these committees meet once the Brown Act is no longer suspended, and yet nobody wants to meet in person. I'm just saying. I'm hoping we'll be able to continue with Zoom for some time to come on committees.
Yeah, well, so John, I'll just comment quickly. Yeah, exactly what you're saying with adding more stuff to potential priorities. I think we could add a lot of stuff here, and we could even break out, I put better buses as a big thing, but you could pick and choose from some of my ideas here and make those, there's a lot of ideas. The main thing I was trying to, one is get some juices flowing on like, hey, what are the priorities? And then a lot of it was that I wanted to kind of show the way that I went from thinking about the real vision, and that our priorities should be, we shouldn't just kind of pick and choose randomly or something like that. That we should have a clear strategy and a North Star to turn to.
So speaking of the Taylor Fife show, this is now the John, Laura, Taylor, and Lucille show.
Right. That's okay.
So what do we do, Laura? Do we?
No, we don't have to do anything. This was to be just a conversation, because
I think it's great. I think we got to have deeper conversations rather than just say parking when projects come up. And parking and traffic will be part of this. I'm sorry to say, but that will come out of it, because it'll be a group discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'll just bring you two into this. I've been talking quite a bit with the executive director of the Hollywood Community Housing, Sarah Letts. John, you know her well, right? But they're the developers of the big complex on Washington between Wilton and Gramercy, where we will likely be having our governing board meetings whenever that happens again in person. Because Taylor, they have parking. I have to say, they've got sufficient parking so that we can actually hold our governing board meetings there. But the point is, all these years that I've lived around the corner from there, Washington Boulevard in that stretch was parkable, all white. All of a sudden, about 6 weeks ago, DOT went in and painted the curb in front of this project red from corner to corner to eliminate parking on Washington. When what we had advocated for and what the developer wanted was actually more parking. We wanted angled parking, which was a request we didn't really have a great deal of hope to get, but we wanted to be able to have neighborhood serving, you know, slow the traffic down and treat that and the next block over, which is Grace Conservatory, Amazing Grace Conservatory, which is this wonderful cultural venue, to have more street parking to bring people in. So we're scrambling and trying to figure out, I mean, the new proposal coming out of my blog, my neighbors, we've agreed to this, is to move the bus stop for the senior dash. There's a dash stop on Washington, but it's really a dash that loops through the neighborhood. So we say loop it one more block over to Gramercy from 18th Street, loop it north, running south so that the stop can be on Gramercy, which is my block, but get it off of Washington. So that's kind of a compromise that we're engaging in, because we'll lose some parking on Gramercy, but we need to be able to have the commercial space that's facing Washington be rentable. You know, we want the business, whoever's going to operate there wants to know that people can park in front of his or her, restaurant. So it's like, how do we engage LADOT into not just jumping into a neighborhood and painting the curbs red? So that'll be, you'll have to help with that. Maybe not, because I think the council office might be helping on this one. But that's part of our issue, is like, no matter what we do, it doesn't seem that they're listening.
So potential priority number 28 is
well, make
to have
LADOT listen to us.
To have viable businesses on our thoroughfares that are accessible to all to get to, however this word is. Right. So I think there's myriad stuff that we can start adding to it.
Remember that one of our things that we put, John, you'll remember, Taylor, you won't, but you can read this on the websites. You're good at finding stuff on our website. One of the things we did is adopt a proposed Washington Boulevard specific plan. This is all the way back in 2004, but it was 13 pages with great detail of what we wanted to see on Washington Boulevard. And it's a policy guideline that we've actually applied to other commercial projects. But one of the things in it is that we wanted the city to build, or at the time, Community Redevelopment Agency, to identify some sites for joint shared use parking structures, because the only way to enliven these streetcar commercial corridors where they were built without parking, we want viable economic activity, people do need to be able to park. And that whole idea has gone out the window when Community Redevelopment Agency ended. So the land that they own did not, even this project, we wanted this what's now a great project, but what we wanted there, what was in the original Community Redevelopment Agency RFP back in the day, was it was going to be mixed use, commercial housing, and joint shared use parking. I mean, that disappeared with this project and with the disappearance, but that's another, how do you, Jefferson Boulevard probably and Pico, all three have the same issue, all these beautiful commercial structures with no parking. And I know you don't like parking, but sometimes.
I mean, parking, yeah, I mean, you can't have no parking. I mean, particularly on somewhere like Jefferson, where the bus doesn't come very often. the bus on Jefferson is tremendously underused.
Right.
Can't just not have parking on Adams. That, you know, if there's no other way to get to the neighborhood, you need to have parking.
Right.
So,
exactly.
and I think, you know, kind of what you're talking about is the very successful Santa Monica strategy where they called it park once and walk, where you had the big parking structures, people park there, and then you have a walkable neighborhood commercial zone where you walk around and you go from business to business, and everyone shares the big parking structures.
Yeah, it's
so
also,
I love that idea.
On a policy level, the city experimented with it, or probably still is, I think, is it in Atwater Village, where see, in other words, joint shared use parking is a concept, but it's not in the code. You know, in other words, when you're wanting to open a restaurant, you know, at 1010, whatever, you know, South Main Street, and you don't have any parking, but there's a joint shared use parking structure at 1110 Main Street, our code it's too far away. You know, so the code doesn't permit you even a covenant you're parking there.
But you talked earlier, Laura, about existing buildings that have no parking that you can't. So that would help that to have existing commercial.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
but the code doesn't provide for it. Is what I'm trying to say. So the city started. They may now. The city started something in Atwater Village, I think, or Glassell Park. That somewhere over there on one of those cute little former main streets, you know, for the neighborhood, where they started permitting businesses to put their parking in a structure that was 2 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the code, you know, the code allows you to covenant parking, but it has to be within a certain number of feet. And joint shared use parking would often not be within that certain number of feet. So that's just a whole other thing. But we wanted that for Washington Boulevard in our proposed specific plan. That didn't happen completely. But we got a CPIO, but it didn't include that.
So I'm going to advocate
that we go home
by going to bed, because
yes,
yes, and I don't want to have a 3-hour planning and zoning meeting.
I know. So John, you're leaving town, right? Tomorrow, next day,
Saturday.
Yeah. So am I gonna be able to convince you to, you know, put off that?
It's going to be 10 o'clock where I'm going to be for that meeting.
Well, that wasn't what you were telling me was the problem. You're saying is it's 10 o'clock, you'll be with friends, and you would have been socializing before then. That's what you told me.
That is correct, which means probably a good 6 hours already with cocktails flowing. So I am on vacation. I'm going to stick to that.
All right. Okay.
If you are in dire need and need a warm body at a keyboard while I'm in New Hampshire,
well, we might be in dire need because
I will tap in and go to sleep.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't care. All right. Anyway, thank you. I'm going to, if anybody wants to save the chat, now would be the time to do it, although I will be able to anyway. And I mean, it will save to me automatically.
Chat as well. Okay, I move that we.
Bye. Thank you, Taylor, for sticking it out so late.
Absolutely.
And seeing the different kinds of things that we deal with. And just by the way, you know, UNNC has approved well over 1,000 units of housing in the last 6 or 7 years. Half of those are affordable. This particular thing is so out of line. You know, it's just an aberration for us to be opposed to a housing project.
It's really gross.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I wasn't totally following the conversation. I was waiting for.
I understand that, but I'm just giving you a heads up. It's a total aberration for us to be so adamantly opposed to a housing project. We support. Yeah, you know, we're not NIMBYs. It's just an aberration. Okay. Good night.
All right. Good night, Laura.
Bye.
Night, John. Bye.